I was recruited to lead the Kennedy Krieger Institute in 1988. Formally, it began in July of 1988. And at the time of that recruitment, I was the head of child neurology at the University of Michigan and had an academic program of serving children with neurologic problems, carrying out research, and we had a faculty of 7 and maybe a total staff of about 25 people. And we were a major resource not only for Ann Arbor at Michigan, but for the whole state of Michigan, and had referrals from the region as far away as Chicago. So my experience and training was that of an academic child neurologist, and I was recruited to come to Kennedy Krieger Institute, which has a much broader mission for children with developmental disabilities, and not one discipline like child neurology, but multiple disciplines, different kinds of physicians, therapists, teachers, a very exciting place to serve this population of children with developmental disorders of the brain. And now the brain, spinal cord, skeletal system, and muscle. So these are the problems we deal with. And what was exciting to me as an opportunity was to work with all the other disciplines and bring them together under one roof. Kennedy Krieger Institute, prior to my coming, had a history of almost 30 years. It began in different it began in its academic mode in 1967 as the Kennedy Institute. And it had its history back to 1937 as the Children's Rehabilitation Institute. Always committed to serving children with developmental disabilities, and always committed to training future professionals who not only would treat children, but would become leaders in other institutions and train others so this would spread. And that was the commitment. And it had a national reputation for that. And in 1988, when I came, the then stepping down president, Hugo Mosier, was world famous for his contributions in understanding some of the rare diseases that underlie some of the developmental disabilities. And so I was coming to an institution with a great, famous leader. We were very lucky that Dr. Mosier, although he was of retirement age and was stepping down from being president, wanted to stay and continue to do his research. And he did for the next 20 years. And he had, in my mind, the most productive phase of his career after sort of his limited retirement from the administration of the Institute to full-time research. The reason it was appealing to make the move and to come to this institute was the timing of the opportunity in science, and the science of medicine, and the science of neuroscience, that we were on the verge of learning so much more about how the child's brain works, develops, can go wrong, and what the repair mechanisms might be. And I think while these problems that we deal with, cerebral palsy, intellectual disability, spinal cord and brain injuries, have been known and worked on for decades, if not hundreds of years, we were on the brink, I thought, not me personally, but the field, of making significant advances and recruiting really top-rate scientific clinicians to attack the problems that underlie the cause and recovery from these injuries. I thought the timing was perfect in 1988. And being at this institute, being at a place where we could raise money to do these things, and where we had the confidence of a community and a commitment of board members to do this, to raise the funds and to be behind us, a city and a state government that was also very interested in what we were doing, was a very special opportunity to bring a team together to really move out and provide more service, train more people, and carry out research. I saw that as an opportunity that was timely. I didn't think that would have been available 20 years earlier, and I was very fortunate to come at a time when we could do this, and we have. When I came, and very appropriately, the physicians at the Institute, as one discipline, were predominantly pediatricians who were specialized in working with children with developmental disabilities. I saw a need to expand other disciplines of medicine. So we brought psychiatrists, physical medicine doctors, and expanded greatly the number of psychologists who were specialized in dealing with these issues. We expanded the efforts in imaging. So we actually have physicists who work at the Institute who have created one of the world's premier MRI imaging centers for research into brain disorders, and we focus on children. And then blossoming before us was the ability to look into the genome. We didn't create that ability to look into the genome, but it was becoming available. In fact, there was leadership people at the University of Michigan that I had known, and I knew this was imminent and relevant to our field. So we were able to recruit basic scientists and really research-oriented clinicians to expand not only the research effort, which we have done, but the clinical services. We made the decision that in addition to having services for a clinic to come bring your children with developmental disabilities, we identified many of the disorders, and we have faculty who are expert in that one problem. That problem might be a relatively common issue like Down syndrome, but then we had a physician whose full career and main issue and interest was Down syndrome. So if you were to come here with a family who had a child with Down syndrome, you would meet Dr. Capone, and you would know that you're not the 3rd or 5th or 20th patient, you're the 500th patient he's seen with that condition. He knows all the variations, he knows what the future holds, he knows what interventions might be useful and helpful. And that was Down syndrome. But we did this for 20 different disabilities. Some behavioral, like autism, some learning disabilities. We got experts in each of these arenas. And so when you came, you didn't come to a developmental disability clinic. You came to the autism clinic. You came to the learning disability clinic. You came to the cerebral palsy clinic. And we had experts in each of these fields. When that happened, the demand increased for our services. And we are now, when I came here in 1988, there were about 400 employees total at the Institute. Now, that includes all the physicians, all the support staff, all the therapists, all the teachers. Today we have 2,500. And we've just been trying to keep up in a very controlled way where we continue to have high quality, the local demand for our services. And I think it blossomed because we have experts in these different arenas. When we go back in the history of Kennedy Krieger, back to the Children's Rehabilitation Institute, it was a residential program. It wasn't really a hospital, but it was a residential program that provided therapy for children with cerebral palsy, particularly. That was their main disability of interest, and education. And as we transitioned from that program to the Kennedy Institute in its more academic mode, services were provided as an inpatient hospital. And we would serve at any given time 30 to 40 children in the hospital. And our outpatient services were support of those children who were about to go in the hospital or children after they had been in the hospital. So it was really an evaluation of who would be admitted, and then follow through for the children who had been admitted. What we realized was we were only dealing them with the most severe problems, and we were not providing service to the majority of children with these disabilities who had no need of hospitalizations. So when you look at our growth, the inpatient hospital still runs about 40 patients at any given time. The outpatient, which had only those visits related to those admissions, we now have 17,000 different children, families, that we will see in a given year. And we have 150,000 visits of those 17,000 children. And very few of them are admitted to the hospital. And almost all of them are seen by not just a developmental disability specialist, but someone who is particularly skilled in the problem they have. So we now have a spinal cord center. So if you've had a child, and even an adult, because we deal with children and adults in that program, who've had a spinal cord injury, you will come and meet the physical therapists in that program are specifically trained and knowledgeable about recovery from spinal cord injury. And the clinicians are. And everyone you meet is of that discipline. And we have 40 of these. Some are big, some are small clinics. Some are very rare diseases that you've never heard of, and the clinic meets once a month for a night, for a day, and that person does research and other things. But there's no other place in the country that might be seeing that particular diagnosis. And we have a whole list of those. And I think that's led, and these clinicians not only see these patients, they are the world's experts. They're the teachers for the country, and they're doing research in these areas. So that's how we've grown in terms of the clinical services. The other thing that became obvious, and it was brought to my attention by the staff and the administration of the teachers at the school, we historically, if I mentioned earlier, the Children's Rehabilitation Institute was a school, as well, a residential school. When it moved into the Krieger mode, we have then a school, but it's not residential. But we only had a lower school, and we were serving a very small school, serving about 40 children as students. I was impressed, and they impressed upon me, the teachers and principal, we needed a middle school. We built one. Then we needed a high school. We built one. There were classrooms that we were being asked to run in the public school system. And we got a principal, hired teachers, and did that. So today, or in 1988, we had 40 students in the Kennedy Krieger Special Education School. Today we have 600. So it's been an enormous growth. Then they all were, lower school students. Today, we go all the way through high school. We have a high school graduation, children getting diplomas, children going on to technical education and whatever. And so a big part of what we do is education. And another big part is research, and another big part is clinical services. And then we've really developed our community outreach programs. So it's all sort of complicated, but we do lots of services in the community to support the living of families who have children with disabilities. One of the reasons I came, because I saw an opportunity to expand both the preclinical or laboratory research and then to have that translate into the clinical research of how it would affect children. A model for me, and partly because I was just well aware of this in my other training, partly because my wife is a cancer clinical trial academic doctor, I was well aware of how the advances were being made to treat cancer, and actually how effective they've been, particularly for children. There have been some amazing changes in survival statistics for children with cancer, and how that came about. And I sort of saw that as a model of when once cancer care was supportive and helping people adapt to the problems and dealing with the symptoms and dealing with the bad outcome, to being not only aggressive, but attracting all these scientists, understanding the genetic basis of cancers, developing targeted treatments, and taking them into the clinic and seeing cures. And I thought, and it wasn't all that insightful, that's what we should be doing in developmental disabilities, that was a model. I also realized, as challenging as cancer is, tackling these brain issues is actually more complicated. We don't get a tissue biopsy. We can't draw something in the blood. And the brain turns out to be more complicated than a cancer cell. Advances in science, to me, the questions are posed for many decades. Answers become available, two reasons. One, you attract really talented people to work on the problem. And two, technology changes. You get new tools to look in. So for us, the tools are imaging, and I'm not going into details, but it's just possible to do things with looking into the living brain that were unimaginable. They were unimaginable 5 years ago. things we can do today, and we have a wonderful imaging center to do that. And we made a commitment, raised money, got government support, and recruited physicists to do this. So we have an incredible imaging center that opens a window into studying what the brain looks like as it's working. The other major advance that was going on that impacts all of medicine and impacting cancer and everything is genomics and understanding better the human genome. And it's only unraveling now, but the tools are just changing, just like with computers. Every 6 months you get a new computer, it's faster, it can do things, but the same is going on in genomics. And every 6 months there's new tools. We can see more of your genes, we can do it faster, we can do it cheaper, we can do it on our patients. So I think having that technology of genomics wasn't available 20 years ago. The imaging wasn't available. It is today. And so we've made a concerted effort to have those tools available for our clinical, and having them makes people want to come here to work with our patients. To do the research, you have to have funding. Philanthropy is very important to us, and dollars that are donated for our research effort allow us to make these recruitments, to bring people here. But nobody gives us enough money to sustain a research project or sustain the work of somebody over years. Where does that money come from? And there's two basic sources. One would be foundations, but many of those foundations are interested in helping you launch a project, but not necessarily sustaining it. And then there's the federal government. And in this country, historically, the NIH, National Institutes of Health, has been the primary funding stream for creative research that relates to health. And that's certainly been the case for us. So as a marker just of activity at the Institute, in 1988, we had $800,000 annual NIH funding. Today, it's about $25 million in NIH funding. Now, the NIH budget as a whole is $30 billion, but that covers cancer, heart disease, liver disease, everything. And then we're not the only brain disease, because there's adults with strokes and Parkinson's disease and multiple sclerosis. And there's other centers certainly doing research. But we have become a major player in carrying out research, but in doing that, in having recruited scientists and doing this, we are dependent on a constant stream of funding of these research efforts. And as I say, for us, at least 80% of the operating research budget comes from the NIH. So it's disturbing when we hear that NIH budgets will be flat. Well, flat really isn't flat, because there's the inflation, even though it's low for the country, medical inflation still is high. Our costs keep going up. So if they tell us the grants are flat, they end up actually funding fewer grants. And if there's going to be a possibility of a 10% cut or a 7% cut in the NIH budget, as some have proposed, we really have to figure out how we're going to adapt to that and how we're going to raise the money from other sources and hopefully not cut back, but it's going to affect our ability to continue to grow. My feeling is, and I can't personally influence the federal government and how it's going to fund the NIH, but I think it's not a long-term good decision to cut back on $30 billion of research effort at the NIH, which is what is hopefully going to change the $2.4 trillion health budget of the country. We spend very little percent-wise of the health budget on research, and I only can believe this is a temporary political issue, and that hopefully as the government looks to how to deal with the deficits and its real problems, will not just say everything in the government gets cut 7%, but we'll look to see what are we going to really cut health research at a time when health expenditures are going up because we don't really understand the causes of these diseases. So I guess I'm optimistic that this is temporary. And it hasn't even happened yet. So I hope it doesn't happen. And what are we going to do? We're going to have to look to our donors, we're going to have to look to foundations, and we're going to have to cut back on our growth until it settles out. We have two things we'd like to accomplish in the next 5 years. One is to get a better handle on how to help people recover from brain injury. We see children who have had devastating injuries, major falls, mainly car accidents, and who come in coma, and we know that particularly with children, the ability to repair is there. We have to understand how to enhance that and speed repair processes. So we're very interested in expanding our services, training professionals on what we know already, and carrying out research to enhance recovery from brain injury. And that's one. Now, there are other issues that are very important to us, but that's going to be a topic of focus for the next several years to build that as a cohesive. And this goes all the way to understanding the genes that are involved in making you resilient and how you make them even more active, those genes, or other approaches, behavioral approaches, physical therapy approaches to enhance recovery. The other is I believe, a really major need to do what we've done in the more medical realm in special education. And what we like to do is to recruit faculty, carry out research, and train professionals on how to bring more science. There is science, but more science to special education. And to know that the things we're spending so much time in the classroom with these children are really the best things to be doing and that they're truly effective. And I think we have to I'd like to bring, I don't want to make it medical, but I want to use the tools of neuroscience, because education, neuroscience I see as one way it impacts is in medical issues. Another is in education. And I think there's should be a neuroscience to how we deal with educating children with developmental brain disorders. A central mission of the Institute from its academic origin in 1967, but even before that, was in the course of providing service to train professionals and to train them to become leaders to go elsewhere. And I just want to put some numbers on it. So at any given moment, there's 500 trainees in our buildings. And 150 of those are long-term, meaning they will be with us at least 1 year. Others might be here 6 weeks. When we go from 150 to 500, the others may be here a few months or even shorter period of time. And these aren't 150 physicians. These are psychologists and physical therapists and speech therapists and occupational therapists, teachers, on and on. And so that's a central part of our mission, and it continues. And since we've been doing this for decades, and these people go everywhere, they're not populating Maryland, they're populating the country. In this field, if you go meet someone who is a treating speech pathologist for children with developmental disabilities or physical therapist in Chicago, there's a fair chance they've been at Kennedy Krieger. There are lots and lots of people who have trained, and I think it's one of our legacies, one of our biggest products. We couldn't be where we are without our Board of Trustees and without the community. And why are they interested? Many of them have children with disabilities, and they see the need, and they're influenced by their neighbors and others who have these problems. And if you talk, as you might, to people getting services here, the families that come, they set the agenda for us. We learn so much from them, not just about what they're living with and the nature of the disability, but what's needed. And we're very responsive to that. And we have a whole system of working with families. And I think if there's a culture, that's something we haven't talked about at this institute, that is one of the attractions to me when I first came here, because this culture goes way back, of support for the people who walk into this building. Now, it's not perfect, but it's pretty good. I get letters from families, not so much talking about the care and what they've understood from the medical and whatever, telling me about how the security guard, gives them a hug when they come in, makes sure they get where they're going, that they've never been into an institution where the support staff, there's just a family feel when you walk into the place. In contrast to other institutions where often people see they're working for whoever they're working for. But I think here, many of the staff here, whether it's the valet parkers to the secretaries to the doctors, and realize we're here to serve these families, and these families have they're heroes, and we're supporting them.